All right, so tonight, whether you've joined us in the past or not, it doesn't change what we're doing tonight. Tonight, we're going to be designing an interactive card game in XD. So some of this is going to be a bit more advanced. I believe there are recordings from last events, so definitely check those out if you're trying to get your feet wet. And if there's not recordings, I'm going to show you some other learning resources that you can use. While we're designing this, I have shared, and it was mentioned, and I'm going to share it again. I have a Creative Cloud library created. If I can find the right window, here we go, right here. And what this is going to do is this is just a collection of assets that you can use wherever it went. There it is. Nope, here it is. And when you open that link, you're going to get something that looks like this. And this is a Creative Cloud web page. You can preview some of the assets we're going to be using tonight. And then you can copy this into your assets or follow along. The follow along piece of this is going to be kind of casual. Being virtual, it is hard to do a direct follow along. So if you do have questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A. But if you're getting stuck, just sit back and enjoy it and look for the recording so that you can kind of follow along at your own pace later. That's going to be the best way to enjoy this. Now, we'll flip back to XD. So I am Matt Rae. I'm a design advocate here at Adobe. You can feel free to reach me at that email address. Find me on Twitter. Twitter is going to get the best, fastest response. And I also added my details into the networking sheet, so find me there. And yeah, always happy to chat XD and answer your questions. If you're not familiar with XD, XD is a user experience design platform, so kind of like Sketch and Figma if you're familiar with those. But it's really focused on prototyping and helping you tell a story faster and more efficiently. So there's a bunch of features. We're not going to get into all of them today. We're really going to focus on prototyping primarily. But really the mission of XD is to help you create the world's best experiences at scale. If you're looking to learn more or you're just getting started with XD, we just launched a new, I can't navigate my computer today. There we go. We just launched a new learn environment. So when you come to adobe.com, you can click under the learn and support section for XD. And all of this content is guides, videos, articles on how to do different things in XD. So definitely check that out. If you're just getting started, you can hit get started, and that will give you a good kind of crash course in XD. And of course, you can get there with this bit.ly. Boom. All right. So with that, if you are following along, get your assets loaded in. What that's going to look like when you add that into XD is in your libraries panel down here, this little bookmark section, you're going to pull up, it's going to default to open into what is called document assets. If you just click this back to libraries button, you'll see all your libraries, and this one should show up as 3-card XD. So when you click on it, you're going to see these different assets. So we have some simple cards, some symbols that we're going to be using, excuse me, and some colors and some sounds, because design is cooler with sound, right? So definitely make sure you have that. And to kick things off, I'm just going to show you what we're going to create, because if you haven't seen the video being shown on social media, this is basically what we're going to create. It's a randomized card game in XD where you can basically, you're going to have to choose the ace of hearts, and you will get it right or you'll get it wrong. It's random. So when you play it, the cards are going to shuffle, right? They're going to animate. And then it gives you some instructions. When you click on a card, that card's going to pull up and flip. The other's going to flip. I happen to get it right. And let me share my sound so that you can hear the awesome features, sound features that we're going to put in. So in that case, I got it right. I can reset the game and play again. So Let's just dive in. I'm going to close this game. That's the completed file. That would be cheating if we just use that. So in XD, I can start by creating a new artboard. I'm going to click on this artboard tool over here on the left, or I can use A on my keyboard. Oops. And when I do that, I have a bunch of preset artboards on the right. I'm going to start with a 1920 artboard because that's what I'm using for everything else. And I'm just going to pull it down here. Now, I like to name things sometimes. So here, I'm just going to start. This is like the landing page or game start. Now, before we go and actually build the game, we need a lot of different elements that go into it. So if we pop back to that window I just closed, we're going to take a look at some of the elements that we need to create. So this game is pretty simple. It has 3 cards that flip and rotate. So really we just need 3 cards, but what goes into that can be a bit more complex. And so if we wanted to, we could draw out each of these cards every single time, make them all unique, and just kind of have a lot of artboards. We don't want that. So what I've done in a previous example of this built in another tool, there was almost 70 artboards created. So not only are you going to be able to create this game in XD, you're going to be able to do it in less than half the number of artboards because of something called components. So what you're seeing up at the top here is all the components that go into this game. And you can see we start very small with some basic icons. These aren't components, but these are what I use to create some components. So the basic foundation of every card here is the same, right? Same structure. And we're adding these components that include each of the, whatever the word is, the symbols. I'm going to go with symbols because I'm blanking. It's going to include each of these, and that's going to allow us, using component states, it's going to allow us to use one single component and just swap out what the face is on each card. So rather than drawing a card every single time, that's just going to become really painful. So this is where we're going to start. And this is a bit more of an intermediate starting point, but let's go from there. So I'm just going to start, and I'm going to copy this whole artboard over to our new document so that we can start from the basics. And you'll notice some of these are already pre-built in your library, so you can kind of cheat, but I'm going to walk through how I built these just so that you know for the future how you can build them. So I started with these basic icons, right? And the first element of a card, if I pull in the card face, just as an example, I can reference this. So each of our corners is the same element here, and it just has the ace signifier and then the symbol that goes with it. And then in the center, we have a symbol. We can also swap this out to like the title card to a logo if you want. You can design your own card however you want, but these are the basic elements, right? We need to identify what card is being shown. So to do that, I essentially figured out the size of that element that I wanted. And we can reference it here too. So it's about 44 pixels. And I probably use that just because it's a nice standard for touch interactions. And I'm saying that now, but I probably had no real reason why I chose that, but we're going to use it again. So in this case, I'm just going to type out A, and I can resize this. You can use whatever font you want. And using the color picker, I'm just going to click black and position it. Now, there's a few different text box types. It doesn't really matter for this because we're just using a single character. It really doesn't matter. But I'm going to go this auto width just in case I need to adjust anything. And I'm just going to position it in that space. Now, I already didn't follow what I said I was going to follow. So there's 44, 44, cool. So let's adjust this down a bit more. We'll go maybe 20, 30. Oh, design is a guessing game, isn't it? Sometimes. There we go, 30. So I'm going to position that into the card. And then I can start by basically pulling in one of these icons as a reference. So I'm just going to copy it and paste it. And this is going to help me position my elements. So again, I'm going to bump that A up. And this is my foundation of the symbol for the card. So what I can do is I'm going to actually add a rectangle here just to create a standard boundary for my design. So just like that, I've got this. I'm going to turn off the border, and I'm actually just going to turn my opacity right down. So it doesn't matter. I'm going to set that to the back. And now when I group this, I'm actually going to switch the text over to a path. And you can do this. You don't have to. I'm just doing it to keep everything in the box. You could also use a mask if you wanted to, but I know I'm not going to change the actual text of the ace. So I'm just going to do convert to path, and now it's a vector path that is manipulated just like any other vector path in XD. And now I'm going to group these together. And then I'm going to make them a component. And so what you'll see in your layers panel, which is the second icon on the bottom, is it's just going to say component 1.1. I can name that if I want to. Where I really want to name this is in the libraries panel. So you'll see anything here with the gray linked icon, that is coming from a library or another document. Anything without it is local to your current document. So just to create a distinction here, I'm going to add new to any of the components I'm creating today. So I'm going to say new, and this is my card symbol. So great, I've got that. Now I can basically copy this out and apply it to any of the cards. So if I was building a card, I could just copy this out, just like this. Maybe even flip these if I wanted to, just like that. And now I have the basic structure for my card, but I only have an ace of diamonds, and I haven't even colored the A properly. So what I can do next is use component states and build in the different states for each one. And these are basically variations. So each state contains, let's see, the shared asset link isn't working. Well, that is a bummer. Sometimes those shared assets can be a little finicky. So I wouldn't worry about it. I'd follow along and then loop back to the recording, and I can try and troubleshoot that or send you a file after so that you can play with it. Okay, so each state basically contains a set of properties that defines that variation. So you can see up top here, we have a default state set. So this is the default. And then I can go in and click this plus and add a new state. So I can keep adding states. It's best to kind of keep it under 10, but I can keep adding those. So what I'm actually going to do first is I'm going to copy and paste each of these other icons into this component and make sure you're clicked in. So if you still see a green border like this and you paste, you're going to paste something on top of the component. If you double click in and see a blue selection like this, you're going to paste within the component. So I'm just going to copy and paste these and get them all just about centered out. And it doesn't really matter the order here. So now my default state has all of these icons in them. And I don't really want to use the default state in this case for anything. I want to explicitly name each of my states. So now I'm going to go through and I'm going to say hearts, diamonds, spades, and clubs. So now I have a state for each one. And what I can do is they all look just like the default state right now, but for hearts, I'm going to click on hearts, and now I'm editing the properties of that in particular. So if I select the A, I can use the I key or this eyedropper on the right and just pick the color from the red, or using that library, I can simply click on this and apply the color just like this. So I'm going to do that. So now I know my ace needs to be red for hearts. And what I can do is going into the layers panel, if I had named each of these icons properly, I'll do that now. I think this is clubs, spades, hearts. There it is. And then diamonds. So now I know I want to hide everything but hearts to get to this. So now you can see on hearts, it looks like this. Default state still looks like that. Now I can basically repeat the process with the other ones. So I'm going to, and the naming didn't stick because I didn't do it on the default state. I basically overrode it on a state. So I should have done that differently. But I know where everything is now. So there we go. Now we have diamonds. And then we're going to do spades. So I'll hide these two. That's the right one, right? Yeah. Clearly I play cards a lot. And then here we're just going to hide these three. So now I have 4 distinct states for this component, which means that I have a single component that I can reuse across my cards. So that's awesome. And that is all contained in our library now. So if I brought, in document asset, so if I brought this out, I can do that same toggle here with the instance of the component. Okay, so that's great. Now the next step is we want to basically do the same thing with this larger icon. So in this case, this one's about 150. So once again, I'll create an artboard, but rather than pick a preset, I'll just draw it out. And if I hold shift, it locks it into a square. And then let's go with 140 tonight. We'll live on the edge. So once again, I can basically just start by copying in the icons I want to use. And you know what? Let's actually make this easier and a bit more on brand tonight. We're going to copy out the UX Wizards logo, and we'll just use that for the center of all our cards. Just to simplify this a little bit. So there, just like that, we have the logo. And we don't really need to make this a component because now this won't use states. If I was doing it this way, I would once again build a state for each of these icons. But in this case, we'll just use a graphic to simplify and change less things. Process is all still the same. So in this case, I'll just do card logo. Okay, great. So now we have the basics of the card, but you'll notice here that I have card face and card back within this section. And if I were to rotate this, it would do nothing because I don't have card back set up. But basically, if we pop back over to our game, right, we need the card face and the card back because we're going to be flipping these cards. So we can create this next. I have already created one, and it's really simple. Again, we have the logo because we're going to be on theme tonight. And all I did here was, once again, used a rectangle, kind of drew out a rough card proportion. Doesn't have to be exact. Added some border radius here, actually turned off the border. And then I just copied and pasted that rectangle and used Option Shift to uniformly, and here I'll just change the fill of that so you can see it, just to uniformly resize it. And then you can kind of adjust it as needed. You might need to adjust the border radius to get the look you want. But then from there, once again, I can kind of just pick that color. And with the card logo in place, I can drag that in and center it out. And voila, I have a card background. Once again, I just grouped this content and then made it a component. I'm questioning my spelling today, but we're going to go with it. So then you have your card back, your logo, and next we can build and assemble the card front. So in the same way, I can take this card and I'm actually just going to copy out that card backing from the symbol, click outside of it and paste. And then I have the exact same card size that I can use for the front. And now all we really need to do here is, because we have our symbol and our card logo, we can pull out the logo, put that in the center again, and then start assembling our elements. So I'm going to put this one about here, and using Option or Alt on Windows, you can measure out the distances to the edge of the artboard. So now I can position it exactly 25 and 25, or however you want. Card design is kind of cool, so experiment with it. And then I can just copy and paste and keep doing the same thing to get the right positioning for everything. Now, rather than copying and pasting these individually, I can just copy and paste, or Command D to duplicate. And just like that, I have everything in position. Now you can experiment. You can kind of, if you want to, offset these so that they can be seen from both angles, you can do that. But now we have our card structure. So once again, I'm going to group this. Oh, yay, they got working. Perfect. Not seeing any other questions. Cool. So I'm going to group this and make this a component as well. In this case, we're going to call this new card front. Okay, so now we have our card front, our card back, and all the elements with their states built in. We pretty much have everything we need to start assembling this. This is where we're going to get into the tricky bits. So you'll notice when I played this game, I wonder if I can get an example here. So as we went from here and hit play, those cards flipped, like they actually rotated and flipped. And that's possible because of something called 3D transforms. So if I select this card and click on this cube in the top right, or Command Control T on my keyboard, I can enable the Gizmo. And that's what it's called. It's called the Gizmo. And it allows us to manipulate a shape along various axes. So you'll see here, and I wish I could zoom in on it more. Maybe I can. You can see it's like it's got a Z axis here, X and Y. So this allows us to click on those and rotate that entire element. So you can see I can tilt it, I can move it back, all in this 2D space, which is really cool. You can do some really awesome stuff with AR and VR. But today we're going to use it to create a flip. And this, other than creating fake logic for the game, is probably going to be the most complex part. So we'll go slow, because it's a little hacky to get this to work. But basically we need both of our elements here, the card back and the card front. And we're going to have essentially two positions for these, right? We're going to have the front and the back. So when the front is showing, the back is basically rotated 180 degrees around so that it's pointing to the back. Now, rotation's one element of the transforms. You'll also see this Z index field. And the Z position, if you're familiar with development, is basically the depth of something in the view or in the space. So 0, by default, everything is 0. So it's all on that same plane, the 2D space. As you add numbers or go up, that comes, I'm trying to do a hand diagram here. That comes like forward in space, closer to you, not actually, but visually. and then negative numbers go back. So basically what we want to do is we want to almost create a card sandwich where one card rotates, so it's 180 degrees around. But just doing that, they're both on the 0 plane. So I can show you how that looks. But we basically want to create a 1 pixel space so that, yeah. So I see a question from David in terms of enabling these transforms. So in the right, you'll need to click on this cube and then select an element. So once it's enabled, then you'll see it right here. If this is not enabled, you won't see it. It's really kind of a hidden feature. Okay, so I'll just start and I'm going to show you what it looks like not changing the Z position and then walk through what it looks like with the Z position. So I'm actually going to swap this out with the new one we just created. Oh, which is a different size. Whoops, silly me. We're going to use the first one. Match them up. Okay. And to test this, we can basically create an artboard and we'll just do a simple back and forth prototype to make sure that we can flip it. So I'm just going to give this like a gray. And to start, I'm going to take my card back and I'm going to say this is the front of the card, front card. And we're going to start by rotating the back of the card and then we'll add the front one on top. So here, I'm just going to take this and I'm going to enable transforms. And you can do everything in the property inspector if you want to. It's just kind of more fun doing it on canvas, but it's more accurate in the property inspector for sure. So here, I'm going to take this and I'm going to go this way. So you can see UX Wizards is now backwards because the card is flipped. We're just kind of seeing through it. So I flipped it 180 degrees and I may have done that wrong. We're going to leave this and I'm just going to pull this in over top and make sure it's centered. Okay. Now I'll copy this whole artboard. And now we basically want to flip the card back, right? We're going to go from that first one to the other direction. And this is where negatives and positives become important. And this is kind of complex and takes some figuring out. But depending on the direction you want to flip it is going to determine whether you set that card to 180 degrees or negative 180 degrees. So we set the first one to 180 degrees, which means it flipped this way. So we're going to set, and you can see I'm still kind of trying to do the math. It is a bit more complex. I want to set this one to negative 180 because it's going to flip back the other way. You can just keep flipping them the same way, but depends on the effect you want to create. So in this case, because this is the back, I'm going to set this to negative 180. And you can see I still have this one. So at this point, I could just use my layers panel, and this is kind of the default. I could bump it back in space and then flip this back to 0. And now we're at the back. But what's going to happen here, if I link up a prototype, a really simple one, we're going to see what this flip looks like. So Auto-Animate, Auto-Animate, and this is just a simple tap. So when I play this, you can see it kind of swung around and then a card flipped. So I did something wrong there. Actually, no, I didn't. So that looks good, but it looks a little glitchy because we haven't set the Z index because they're basically on the same plane. So what you're seeing is one card flipping and then the other one kind of coming up in the layers panel, which isn't what you really want. So what we're going to do is I'm actually going to set this back to the same layer order as the previous. And then we're going to use Z index to change this. So on the front card, since I want the front to be the front, I'm going to set a Z index of 1. So that just pulled it forward a little bit. And then the back, I'm going to set -1. So that just pushed it back 1. And then here, because the card front is actually in the back, we're going to do -1 there. And then the card front is going to be 1. So now this is going to change how that looks a little bit. And you get a nice smooth flip because it's actually changing in space its position. It's not just moving layers. And had I not done the Z index and kept them in the same layer structure, you would really just see the front and it would kind of like go and just show up again, which isn't what you want. So now that we have this awesome card flip, we can start building the game, which is awesome. So hopefully you're caught up. Yeah.
So what's the difference, just to catch up? So the difference between the layer order and the Z index, like I understand Z is what, like kind of imagining the space coming towards you or away from you. Mm-hmm. But does the layer order also impact how that animation would work?
Yeah. So if I set this back, I'm just going to undo those Z indexes. And this is basically, so undoing these Z indexes, you can see that front layer pop back because it is the top layer in this stack. So if I animated it or played this right now with same Z index, just the front cards on the top layer, back cards on the bottom layer, that front card's just going to spin and you're only going to see that card because it's top of the visibility in terms of basic 2D space. Mm-hmm. So layer order is good for 2D space. We have to go Z index to change that. And then the layer order kind of doesn't matter as much. So here, if I just switch this back, that's that first animation we got where it does flip, but it takes a second to like bring the layer order up because layer order doesn't really auto-animate. So it's just kind of showing up at the end.
Got it. That makes sense. Okay, cool.
Okay. So that's that. I guess I could just undo everything. No. We'll do -1. And so that's why we're creating this space. We're keeping the layers the same to create, avoid any glitchiness. And thinking about this, I don't think I did this on the original game, so that there was some glitchy. So this is even going to be better than the original. So there we go. And you can see it's flipping back different directions. If I just use 180, I could basically make it rotate in a circle, but yeah. Okay. So now we have those two pieces. We're still looking good on questions. Okay, so let's build out our view. Now in our library, we're going to take this new card. Actually, I was using this one. Oops. And the Tesseract or the Gizmo can get in your way. I like to call the cube the Tesseract for some reason. I'm not sure why. Because this is a white card border, we'll just dim down the background. And actually, we can even go like, let's go wizard mode. I don't know what wizard mode is, but we're going to do it. So, excuse me. Here, to just start things off, we're just going to copy and paste this. And you can position these however you want. You'll notice in the original, I kind of started with the cards smaller and flipped. So to kind of show where the card starts. And then they basically zoom in and start their shuffle. So we'll add in a play button. I'm going to just, for the sake of time, copy all these elements. These aren't super important elements. There we go. So we'll add a play button. We'll drop this in. And we'll get rid of that and we'll bring in the Wizards logo. Is this the most number of UX Wizards logos on a page? We'll set this to blue. These details really don't matter. These are up to you. You can make them however you want. So here we have these, right? And I've only dropped in the 3 card backs. What I'm going to do is actually add in the card fronts here now. Oops. And be careful, because you can override components by dragging them in. I drop them just outside of the component. Otherwise, you're going to just replace it, which isn't what you want. So here I have these 3 components. And just to set things up, I'm basically going to set these up and then make them into groups. There's some limitations in transforms with components, so we can't just set, or component states at least. So we can't just set states for the flips yet, but we can still make this a little bit easier on ourselves by grouping things together. So here I'm just going to set each of these up. I'm going to start here and turn on my transforms. And remember, this is going to be, actually, I wonder. That does not work. Do not use the paste appearance option. All right, we're going to set -1 here and then 180 degrees. So we get our backflip, -1 and 180 degrees. -1. You're going to have that stuck in your head as you fall asleep tonight. -1, 180 degrees. But you're going to have an awesome card game to show for it. All right, so those are all set up. So now I'm going to move these front cards up, and I'm just doing it all in bulk just because it's faster. And I can use these smart guides to make sure everything's aligned. And then for each of these, I can do this in bulk as well, and I should have done it for the back. I'm going to set those to 1 and 0 degrees. So I'm going to start by grouping these. And Auto-Animate works off of layer naming. So it's important to have consistent layer naming. So that's why I'm grouping these, so that I can kind of denote each card as I'm going. So as I'm adding rotations and flips, Auto-Animate will track that all. So let's just call this card 1. We'll keep it super simple. Card 2. And we'll set the middle card to be hearts. So we can just denote it so that as we're trying to find the right one and flip, we can see it here. And actually, let's just name them all. We'll go clubs. You'll notice we set up states for everything, but we're only going to use a few, 3 of the 4. So now with clubs, I know I have this card set up. Ow. Okay. Now I know why we set up states on the card in the beginning. So we don't have to go one by one here. So we're going to just zip back up here. I can easily come back into this card front and hit edit main component. And it's going to pull it up here for me. And then I can go in and say, this is going to be hearts, hearts. And if we don't do this, then we have to flip the state of each little icon every time. And that's painful. So we're going to do this so that we don't have headaches. Clubs. Okay, so then we can just come in here, flip these over for hearts. And there's our hearts. We can do the same for diamond. And you can picture this already. This seems potentially tedious. If we had to do this for every card, that'd be painful. And that's why this setup here, because this is a unique use case. Did I do that right? Yeah. The setup is the most important, just to save you time. And if you set things up really well in XD, you can get some really nice efficiencies using states. And that's why it's really good for design systems. When you've kind of thought through something, you can engineer it so that as you're actually designing, it moves really quickly. So with that in place, I can come back here. And rather than go one by one, I can just say, this is going to be my clubs card. So I'll double click, find that component and flip it to clubs. and we're set. And this one is going to be hearts, and this one's spades. So now we're set up. We have that home screen. So basically from here, we need to build out the framework for the game. And how this works is it starts by shuffling the cards, which flip, and then they're going to go into this rotation and shuffle. They're going to move position. And then from there, essentially we prompt the user to say, select a card or select the ace of hearts. And within that section, there's some trickery. We can use some wizardry, I should say, to create the illusion that it's random and add some complexity to the game. So we'll go through that once we get there. But to start, we want to start with the shuffle. And so the first interaction is we can copy and paste this so that we get the same naming here of our groups. You can get complex if you want and move the title, move the button. We will move the button just out of the screen so it animates and it kind of comes down off screen. And then we'll turn down the opacity so it looks like it's just fading out of view. And then with each of these, we can bring these cards forward as well if we want to, right? Just by clicking on that. And because it's on the group, we're bringing the whole group and all of its contents forward as well. So what I'm going to do is select each of these and just bring it forward into like more than that. Enhance. All right, we'll go 80. And then we can kind of space them out. Again, this is all preference. This has nothing to do with the mechanics of the game. We'll slide it down a little bit and just recenter it. So when this happens, we want our first screen, our first interaction to be that flip. So once again, in here, we kind of need to go from the new card front and to the back, and we need to flip them. So this involves that switch. So once again, if we reference our card back here, we can see, and that's why we set it up, so we have a reference. We can see card back is going to be 1 and 0. New card is going to be -1 and -180. So the card front is pretty much always going to be negative when it's flipped. The card back is going to be semi-positive. That was not a good rule of thumb. We're going to take this. I'm going to double click, find the new card front here, right? And we're going to go -1, -180. And then take that back and again bump that up from its 1 or from its -1 to 1 and 0. And so now we have a flip. So if I played this or connected it with prototyping, I want that play button to be my trigger, and it's going to go to that new screen. We're still going to use tap here with an Auto-Animate. And this is where you can start experimenting with easings, but I'm just going to show you what this looks like at this point. So when I click play now, the cards are going to come forward in space, the play button will go down, and the first card will flip, just like that. Now, obviously, we want all 3 cards to flip, so we just need to duplicate that real quick. And this is why I said you're going to be sick of 1 and negative and 180. And we'll set this back. But once we have this, then we're really just changing rotation and positioning. And now we have both the front and back versions, so we can copy those and paste them, and we don't really need to keep doing the flip. A lesson I learned after I finished it the first time. -1 this is the back. So this is going to go 0 and 1. Why didn't I want to go 1? Not 11, 1. All right, we're there. Okay, so now that is our first stage. We hit play now, all the cards flip. And again, you can experiment with the angle, so if you want them to flip differently, they can. But now from here, we want it to shuffle, right? So I'm gonna say, I can call this shuffle stage 1. You don't have to name it. I just like to keep track because I lose track easily. And so now we can kind of just come up with a random pattern. We're gonna want multiple stages of a shuffle, right? You're not just gonna shuffle once. So I wouldn't copy paste yet. I would kind of copy paste as you go so that you can maintain the previous position. And all we're gonna do is we can rotate a card. Now I see the flaw of using a logo, as you can see when it's upside down. So that's something to think about. We can override that, I think. Could get a little crazy. So now we've kind of flipped some of the cards. I'm actually going to leave this one unflipped, and we can just change the positioning of them all. Now, we could easily go and swap things manually if we wanted to, but there's an easier way, and I'm actually going to delete this and show you that way using stacks. So I'm going to start and call this my card group. Now stacks works in a group, and because of Auto-Animate, I'm going to just quickly go back and call this card group 2 so that we maintain that naming. And with card group selected here, I'm going to enable a stack and reposition it. So now what a stack allows us to do in this card group is it allows us to easily rearrange these elements. Not sure what it's doing. But we can just shuffle these rather than moving them manually every time. So that means we can also rotate them and then reposition them as we go. So we have that set up 1, 2, 3. Now I can copy and paste this and say, okay, I'm going to rotate this one and then shuffle it over. Maybe I'll shuffle this one over and rotate that as well. And then I can just keep building. And so from there, then I can maybe flip this one back. And you can get creative and experiment with the rotation direction as well. And we probably want that over there. And really, this is up to you. We'll just do 3 different stages. I don't think that's going to do anything, but we can just shuffle them around. And it's really just for visual. So you can experiment and see what looks really good visually to create that shuffle. But to tie all of these together, we're going to want to use time triggers. So we hit the play button to get to screen 1. After that, we just want to go to screen 2. So in the trigger menu up at the top, we're going to use a time. Now there's a couple elements to time. The first is delay. So this is from when that page, when you land on that page, how long before you execute this action, which we're still going to keep as Auto-Animate. That's going to be the magic for all of this except one step. And again, you can play with the easing. We'll experiment with that in a second. So from this first one, I'm just going to keep a delay of 0 seconds, keep the shuffle, we'll call it about 0.4. And I want to keep that consistent. So I'm just going to draw those out for the rest, and XD is going to remember those settings from the previous option. So now we can show what this looks like. I'm going to hit play now. Wow, that's way too fast. This is why you experiment. We're going to slow that down to 0.8 for all of these. And what's the easing? Their ease out. We'll ease in and out just to keep it a little easier. Okay, let's see how this looks. This is why I love live preview in XD, because normally I'd have this up on another monitor and I can design and just see what mistakes I'm making as I go. There we go. That's a little bit nicer. So you can get that nice rotation. You can see the cards flipping. Obviously, you don't want to flip them in 3D space when you're shuffling. I mean, in real life, I guess you would, but for this, you get a nice action, nice visual, and you can keep building onto that if you want, but this gives you enough to get the illusion across that you're shuffling them. Because really, this shuffle means nothing. Doesn't matter. Because next, we're going to start messing with that shuffle. So after the shuffle is where we want to bring in that action. And if we look at this previous game, this is where we bring in this card with this kind of pop-up that says select the ace of hearts. Now what you'll notice is there's actually 3 of them. And so I'll get into that in a minute. But to create that, I'm just going to create one more artboard. And I'm going to bring it down. And I'm generally grouping things, again, for ease of navigation later in the sections that it's kind of like a tree structure, but not. So this is going to be select prompt 1. And so once again, we can use our text tool here and say, I mean, we can even repurpose the play button if we wanted to here, which is still hiding down here. We can bring it back. I'm going to turn this off. And we might want to lose the shadow. It does have padding. So we can just say, select the ace of hearts. And let's even just add in, do I have stacks enabled on this? No, so I'm just going to add a little stack group here into this button and add in a little polygon and show you a little trick. We're past Valentine's Day now, but when you're editing polygons in the appearance view here, you can kind of change how many sides a polygon has, change the curvature, whatever this thing's called. You can make a little gear. But you can also type in the less than and 3 to make the heart emoji and create a heart. So we're going to do that. I'm just going to resize that here.
I want to know who came up with that idea. That's awesome.
Me too. I'm not sure.
So
oh, and so I created this group here, and I can turn on a stack within that and then actually control the spacing of that heart and the text. So here, as I add to my text, maybe I'll make it a little more Canadian. I don't know. The heart's going to keep pushing out as you expand the text. So there you go. Now we have this prompt, and maybe we'll make it a little bit more square just so that it looks less like a button, more like a prompt. Love it. Yeah, nice. Okay, so there's the first one. And I'm actually going to want to copy that. And just to be sure, paste it back here and turn down the opacity. You can, again, play with position. And so what's going to happen is I'm going to start again with another time transition, and this one doesn't need a delay either because it's basically the same thing. So now we're going to get play now. That's going to shuffle. And then we get that nice prompt that slides up. Now the magic is we want to start creating some randomization. And so right now, if I use this screen as the sole prompt, every time I land on this selection screen, I'm going to get 1, 2, 3 in that order. And so that becomes predictable really easily. So to change that, I'm just going to start with adding another, not another call out, another artboard here, and I'm going to call this prompt 2, and then prompt 3. And just like in the shuffle, and this is why the shuffle is basically null and void at this point other than visual, is now we can change these prompts. So in this case, hearts is in the middle. In this one, maybe I'll switch it so that hearts is on the left. And then over here, hearts is on the right. And I can even switch these cards if I want to. Why not? So now I have three different variations that if I just keep clicking on the middle, I'm not going to get um, the same card. And that's the goal. But to make it less predictable, in prototype mode, we're going to use the time trigger again to go over, and we'll use the same transition time of 0.8 just so that it's consistent. Actually, no, we're going to change that on this because there's no visual changes here. But we are also going to set a delay. So this is going to change, and we're going to use a different delay for each segment so that we can create a bit of an unpredictability. This is Awkward Hearts. Awkward Hearts Club. That does sound like a band. That's kind of cool. So in this case, we can actually go up to 5 seconds, but I want that first one to be a little bit quicker, just to, and in fact, we can even make this 0 because there's no animation happening. This could be a basic transition as well of a dissolve. Doesn't really matter because they're the exact same screen. What we're focused on is that time delay. And so here I can go up to 5 seconds if I want to. I'm going to go 1.2, and there's no science to this whatsoever. This is really just connecting these screens and playing around with the transition times. And maybe this one's going to be 0.2. So now what this looks like is that it doesn't look like it's doing anything, but it is because it's actually transitioning, and you can see I might have a position off slightly on one card, and you can kind of see it wiggle a little bit, but that might just be how it's showing on my screen. But basically nothing's happening. So then from here is where we start building in the selection game. And this is why I kind of separate things out, because from here we basically will have 3 flows. And that's why I kind of kept it to 3, because as you get to more cards, it's just more and more artboards you need to design. So you can get your point across with 3. Okay, so we'll start with the first one. And basically what we need to create now is, I'm looking at the time, I think we're good on time. We need to create basically 1 correct workflow and 2 incorrect workflows, because there's only 1 option, of course. So let's start with the correct option. And to do that, I'm just going to copy and paste this again. I'll pull down a card here and start building in a section. Yeah, and I actually created the heart in the library just using that shortcut to create that icon. It's super handy. So now this is going to be, we'll call this correct workflow 1. And so again, hearts is in the middle here. And the effect we want to go for, if we go back to our screen, is that we're going to bring the selected card up. Oh, we got the sad sound. We're going to bring that selected card up, flip it first, and then reveal the other 2. And then we'll get into the overlay. So that's what you can see here. We've basically created this structure. So we have root A, all the root A's, card 1, 2, and 3, and then each of their options. And then depending on what card was selected, we'll go into these. So we'll do that. I'm going to keep that naming because that's actually nice naming. Card 1. So in this case, we'll actually just do the incorrect workflow first for card 1. But if I paste out and do card 2, this can take us to our correct workflow. So once again, we'll select hearts here and say that that's the selected card. We're going to want to bring that card forward. So once again, I'll toggle on my Tesseract, my 3D transforms, card 2, and then I'll just pull that forward. I can pull it forward in space to get kind of what I want it to look like. And so here we're about 170. So I'm just going to round up to 170 so that it's easily repeatable. And once again, we can toggle this down and just set that appearance to 0. And what's nice about XD is I can then copy and paste this and just apply it to all the artboards at once. So we'll do that at the end. Okay, so now it's here. Our next step is that we want this to flip. So this is where we'd go in and do our flip, but because we already have it configured, we don't need to go and do all those details. I'll just come in here. The nice thing about stacks is I can delete that and paste the previous one in, and it's just going to fit. I can pull it back to center and it's in the right position. The Z index is just incorrect here. So I'm going to toggle that on once again and go 170, and it's going to get it back to where this one was. So just like that, we're building this up. The next phase is, of course, those other two cards flipping. And so I can look at these and be like clubs and hearts. So I'm going to select both of those cards, clubs and spades, sorry. And once again, I can just come in here and delete those, paste these in, and they were set to 80. So I'm going to turn those up to 80. Why did those not paste in the... Weird. I'm actually just going to flip those. And then we can use those to go off of rather than changing the Z index every time. So this is going to be -1, -180, 1, 0. How's everybody doing following along? Are you having success? Are you confused out of your mind? Are you just sitting back and enjoying it? We're going to having fun. It's a good combination for sure. Okay, so now we have these flipped. Let's make sure I did them in the right. I think so. So we can test that really easily because now we basically have this workflow set up. So from here, right, let's say in this case, I'm selecting the Ace of Hearts. So on this, I'm going to go into this flow, if that makes sense. When I select that middle card, I want to go into here. And I'm going to do that with a tap and an Auto-Animate. And we'll go back to our 0.8 just to get a nice visual. And then from here, this is all going to be time transitions. Again, we don't want to require any user input. So we'll go artboard to artboard, set that to time, 0 seconds and 0.8. And then once again, we'll do this here. And if you want, on this one, because we're showing a card, we can set a bit more of a delay. So let's say we'll set a 0.6 second delay just so that you can see, oh yeah, I think I got it. We'll reveal the other ones. Now the trick here is that I've already set up my time triggers between cards. So I'm just going to undo this one so that I can show you without trying to guess the randomization. So here, right, we can click on any of these, or we will be able to. But if I click on this, that card's going to come up. And I got the rotations wrong. So this is why you test things. In that case, I copied things a little bit weird. So that's where it can be helpful to set those animations yourself first. But you could see as soon as I got here, and it's kind of a cool effect. We're going to run with it for now. You can see that that card came up, it delayed, and then the other two came in. We can do a quick debug and see what I did. card back is 1 and 0. Oh, that should be, oh, that was right. I'll have to experiment with that. We're going to run with it. That's part of the fun of 3D transforms. So let's build out the rest of this flow, because after this, it's kind of copy and paste for the rest and just adjusting things. And then I want to make sure we have time to do the little pop-up as well. So here, let's set this up as we're selecting card 1. So again, we're going to come in here. We have a Z index of 170. So I'm going to set that here on card 1. And then copy and paste that. If you don't want it to, XD basically defaults to pasting in the next position from left to right, and then it goes down. So if you're finding you're copying and pasting and artboards are showing up, you can just hold Alt or Option and drag it down and duplicate it into the place you want. So here, let's just manually flip this one ourselves. So we can see we have the card front. I'm going to go 180 and 1. And then here we'll go back to -1, 180. Sorry, that should be 0. Okay, so we have that set up, and then we'll copy and I should Option Alt. And then in this case, we'll pull these other 2 cards. We'll flip these. And let's just, no. Zero. Then we'll flip the back one. Okay, let's see if that works. I'm going to wire these up quick. We've got our time. I'm going to set that back to 0.2 here. And then this one's going to be 0.6. Okay, that looks better. So I did that one right. Sometimes the copy and pasting, there might be a layer or something that got named, or a number was added to the name from the copy and paste. So that's something to be cautious of when you're getting those effects. But super easy to fix. This is a back, so this is going to go -1, 180. You sick of those numbers yet? I am. But look what we're creating. All right. So now that we have these 2 flows, I can hook this one up. I'm just going to quickly copy and paste this into root card 3. Okay. And then we can adjust this and say, what's kind of cool about, no, we want to make sure that we have the right card because we're flipping it. But what I can do is I can basically just move around this new Z index card to the card I want. And then a little hack, it kind of breaks your whole, no, this is going to be confusing. But what you could do is you could go into your card front and just manually flip things. And now it's a hearts. If you wanted to, you could probably do that and save on artboards again, but I'll leave it for now. I'm going to undo that. So this is going to go back to 0 or 80, sorry. And then we want this one to be 170. This is where things get a little tedious, right? I would love to have states in components or transforms in component states, because then you could just set these up as states. But for now, I'm gonna follow along. And this is where, once this is set up, all our cards, all our variations of the cards are here. So we can just copy and paste that to the other ones and kind of switch them around as needed. So this is really the painful part, is just getting these set up. So here, card back, I'm gonna go -1, 180. And then that card front, 10. It's a pain because this is what we want in the next one, but okay. And we're back. One more to go. And in this case, because everything's already flipped, I can basically just switch out my Z position on the card. That's what happens when you bring it really close into space. You can see if I select this, I don't even think I can select it. Oh no, I'm gonna undo that. I just set that to like 800. I'm very clumsy on my number pad. Yeah, you can do some cool things. And that would be, if you did that over 5 seconds, I'd be like, woo. Okay. It is prototype time. That's going to go time trigger of 0.2 seconds. And then here we'll go 0.6. Voila. Okay. So now we'll hook these up into this flow. And in this case, this one is going to go to this with a tap. This one's going to go here with a tap. And so now, again, we've disconnected this from the randomizer. So my first flow is going to pull up that. Other cards will flip. If we try this again and go to the right, we'll get that same effect, just like this. And then the fun chaos mode. Sweet. Add some variety. So now we have each of our workflows. And what we can do is use something called overlays. And you'll see I have that set up down here for ease of use. I'm just going to copy and paste these. And all these are our artboards. So you'll see these are artboards with basically no fill because they've been set to overlay. The fill's been stripped out of the artboard. But you can create anything you want. So I have this like overlay layer, which is just a transparent fill, dark fill. And these were set to the artboard size I used in the other game. So we're just going to transition them so that they actually fit over the screen. So I'm going to create another 1920 screen. And this will just allow us to rebuild these overlays. So here, and the reason we're using overlays is because we can use them in multiple artboards and they just appear and we can reference one single artboard. So we don't have to keep multiples. So this is going to be congratulations. And then we'll have story. Okay. And so I'm just going to copy and paste all these elements. I'm going to turn off transforms. So copying and pasting this, I can basically just, I can resize this. Responsive resize gets it right sometimes, most of the time. But modals, sometimes you need to adjust. So here we have that. And I can just copy and paste this and say, sorry, the wrong card. So basically these are set up in the same ways, just different text. And maybe for extra effect, we can make this one red. Please try again. For the Canadians, that's just the roll up the rim, you're a loser statement. Okay, so those are set up. We'll set a red shadow on this. And there's a couple elements to these. These are each going to link. So from these last screens, we'll set up the interactions. So from prototype mode, again, we'll use a time transition to these. We'll use time, but rather than auto-animate, we're going to select overlay. So that's going to put this green box on top, and it's position centered because it's the same size. You can adjust it if you want, but actually you can't because it's the same size. And then you can set different animations. So I'm just going to keep a simple dissolve. You can slide it up and down if you want. And it's helpful to link it to the right screen. So this one's actually the error state. So we'll link it there. From here, we'll link it here. And this one will link here. So now what's going to happen when I start this flow, those cards are going to go. I got the wrong one. And so that's going to show up on top and say I got the wrong card. But what I can do is then, because these are overlays, I can set a link once. And so from here, I'm going to go and prototype this over here. I want that to just transition. So maybe we can do a slide down. And then from here, this is going to be the exact same transition. So I can draw it out again if I want to, but I can also delete that. If I copy this button in prototype mode, I can actually paste the interactions onto the other button. And so it's going to do the exact same thing, and I don't have to go through and set it up. So now they're both going to the same spot, same settings, everything. And if you do the same thing in design mode, you're pasting appearance. So it just contextually changes. So now if we go and do this, it's going to flip. I guess I could start this at a later screen. Now when I hit please try again, that'll slide down and restart the game. And then the loop continues. But we can add something extra to these. And that's where you, in your library, you'll see some sound files in here. So we have stutter, low power, swoosh. And I haven't actually used these from a library. So I'm curious to see how this goes. I have a sound kit set up. But basically, from this overlay, we want an action to happen. And so here you can see there's a tap. I'm going to set this back to time. And by default, there's an action to go to a previous artboard. We don't really need that as part of this workflow. So instead, I'm going to go audio playback. And here, okay, I guess you can't use it. I can add a new file. And so I have this sound kit already set up. So we can come in and say, there we go. So for congratulations, we're going to get that little chime. And then for this one, we'll set that up to be time as well, and audio playback. And then we can add in a new file. And using the library, you should be able to download it as well, just into a desktop. Is this tutorial, will it be available in the YouTube? I'm assuming that's where the recording will be posted. Assuming I have time at some point in the future, I'd love to do a YouTube video on this too. But I'm sure the recording will be posted on the Wizards page.
Yes, on the UX Wizards channel, we'll definitely post this. It might take a day for us to get the video uploaded, but it'll definitely be on there. If you're in the Slack channel, we'll post when it gets posted on the YouTube channel.
Perfect. So for this one, we'll use the low power mode just to kind of make it sad. So what's going to happen here is when those overlays pop up, the sound plays immediately after, and then you can start that game again. You can also experiment with sound or audio. So if I select this again, I could switch to speech playback and say, in a nice computer voice,
Oh, I'm so sorry, but that is the wrong card.
So you can experiment. You can use audio or speech, and there's a bunch of different voices. So of course, you can switch it up. Let's see what Kimberly has to say. I pretty much just used Joanna, so I don't know what these.
Oh, I'm so sorry, but that is the wrong card.
It's kind of sassy. We'll go with that. All right. So now we've built this in to all these workflows. Once we go and connect this randomizer again, we want that same thing for the other sections. So if I go to design mode, I'm just going to, again, drag these out. How are we doing on questions? I know we're at about 5:30, so I want to make sure there's any. If you have questions, ask them now. I see. How could I adapt this for, say, an iOS-friendly version? So make the screen an iOS size for one. Using the XD preview app on iOS, if I can bring it up. Oh, I have a few emails. XD. So the preview app will allow you to access the cloud documents on here. So you could build it with the iOS artboard to match your phone. And then I think there's an interaction. I haven't actually used voice lately on the mobile, but there's an interaction like press and hold or something. Um, it's not voice activated. What am I talking about? Yes, you can do that. Just use the XD preview app and set the right artboard size. Voice has nothing to do with this. It is, my mind is on Friday. Okay, so any other questions that I missed so far? Don't think so. Okay, definitely drop them in the Q&A if you have them. What we're going to do now is I'm just going to copy and paste all of these artboards, and rather than selecting all of them, I can just highlight them and then copy and paste and position these under the next category. And then I'll do the same thing with the final. It looks like I missed the third one, which is good. So I'll just copy that. And look at that magic. It autofills the gaps. Isn't that cool? So now we basically have the exact same setup, which isn't what we want because the positions have changed. So in this case, if we go back to our layers panel, card two, the hearts is the first one in the row. And then card one and card three. So they've shuffled. So what we can do is, because we have everything highlighted here, we can basically reposition the cards. And so if we know hearts is in the second position, here we have the correct workflow, right? So this is as simple as basically doing this. And now hearts is set up. And we know clubs is in the second position. So I can just drag these over. And let's actually, spades is in the third. So that is our setup. All we have to do is swap the stack. And so spades didn't actually move in this one. So that's convenient. And had I copied and pasted this in prototype mode, we would have had all of the same links. But I'm just going to show you how we set that up one more time so that it's really clear. So here, hearts, we know hearts is in this one. So I'm just going to set up my tap with Auto-Animate and 0.8 transition. And then here we're going to go time of 0.2 and 0.8. And then we had our delay of 0.6 here. So I can just keep going. And here I'm going to go to clubs. And then in the same way, I could copy this and paste the interactions on these, but that's going to go to that end destination. So I can then just kind of drag it and flip it to the other one. So here, in that same way, I can copy this, paste interaction, and then swap the drag. So now these should all line up. And if we test that and undo our time trigger, moral of the story here is if you're demoing this, don't set up the time triggers first. So there we go. We've got our ace with all the funky transitions again. And then the second one should go to our clubs with nice transitions. Yep. Boom. And then we can set up that third one. And so we can basically just copy this one again, paste that interaction. Ooh. Maybe don't paste the interaction. Maybe just drag it. Tap Auto-Animate 0.8. And then again, we can copy that, paste the interaction. And this just saves us some setup time if we have variety of interaction types. And so in this case, because we have different variations in the time delay, it doesn't make sense to just keep using the default last used, because then we'd have to be changing it each time. So now we should be all set up, and we can repeat that process over here. But to show you another way, I'm just going to copy these and then paste them. And what you'll see is I actually have all those interactions already connected. So when I copy and paste in prototype mode, it pastes the artboards with all their links connected. So I don't have to go through. And if I had done that from the start, I could have saved a lot of time, but I'm trying to show you how it works. So next we'll go not to the object menu, to prototype. And here we just need to double check that our positioning's right. So in this case, spades is first. And so that is over here. So this is my correct flow for spades. So I'm just going to make sure spades is in the right position. And then I know it's clubs, then hearts. So it looks like it checks out. And this is where it helps to like strategically reposition them in the top three. And then we have spades and clubs. So in this case, I'll drag heart over. I know this is going over here. And this is why I love stacks, because you can just quickly shuffle things and you don't have to yeah, that's right. Yeah. No. Like that. What did I just do there? Clubs, hearts, spades, clubs, hearts, spades, clubs, hearts. And this is why naming your groups, it can be really helpful too. Because then you can see exactly in the layers panel, when the cards are flipped over, you can see where everything is. Spades, clubs, hearts. Woo, don't select the component. Okay, so now that's all set up and the prototype links are already there for us. So now we just have to connect these into the right flow. So spades is over here. Yeah. Spades, clubs, hearts. And these are all using our tap with Auto-Animate because it's remembering up in there. So now we can reconnect our time triggers. So here we're going to go over here, and it remembered that time because that's what was last used up here. And we'll use 0.6, 0.8, sure. And then here, rather than 0.6, let's use 1 second, and we'll go 0.2. And then we never deleted this last one, so it's there. So once again, here, nothing should be changing. What did I do there? Oh, this is why we use transition. So if we dissolve them, they're not going to shuffle because they're not changing position. They're just dissolving between cards. So if I play this again, you can see now they're not moving. So that's why you don't want Auto-Animate for this one. But now we should have a fully complete flow. So let's try the game. So we'll hit play now. Okay, select Ace of Hearts. I'm going to go middle. We didn't connect. We didn't finish our connection. This is why we test. So once again, we're going to basically just copy these interactions. So in this case, this is an incorrect flow. So I'm going to copy that. And then I can just paste that onto the two incorrect flows here because they're going to go there. So I can do this in bulk actually, and I can just go right across the board and do that. And then in this case, I know this one is the correct flow. So I'll go to the correct flow on both of these and paste the interaction, and we're all set. So one more time, we'll play that. And in the chat, which card should I pick? 1, 2, or 3? 3, okay. We're wrong.
Oh, I'm so sorry, but that is the wrong card.
Is that Kimberly?
That's Kimberly. And then we can reset the game and play again. So just like that. And what I'll do is we can now basically we can mark this as that home screen and call this our Wizards 3 card game. And if I go to share mode, I can open this up in presentation mode or user testing mode. If I do user testing mode, you can't navigate the prototype at all using arrow keys. It's just the game structure. So if I create this link, then that will generate, and you're going to be able to play this in a second. And just like that, we have the 3-card game, albeit probably better than the first go around that I created. And it's all UX Wizards theme, so even better. But yeah, using share mode, you can just copy this link, paste it into a chat or share it out via email, and then anybody can access the game through their browser. And all thanks to Auto-Animate and 3D transforms. So with that, I'll open it up to questions. And I think there's some announcements on the Wizard side too.
Yeah, we'll take if there's any last minute questions, post them in the chat or the Q&A really quick, and we can cover anything XD related, even if it's not super specific to this prototype, that's fine too. And if not, we'll move on to raffle and other things like that.
No problem. Was anybody able to follow along? And Sherry's got a question, but if you were able to follow along and created something, feel free to share the link in chat or send it to me in email. I'd love to see what everyone else came up with. Go for it, Sherry. How do you close XD without losing your work? Good question. So there's 2 types of files in XD. I'm using a cloud file, and it will autosave at certain increments. So you can see here it's saved every really random increments, basically when changes happen. And these ones you can save. So now I can save this as game complete. And if I wanted to save it at different stages, I could. Anything you save here will last forever. All these timestamps will just expire after 30 days. But a cloud file will autosave. I still use Command S all the time. I don't know, from the older days where things always crash. And so I like to save things all the time. But generally, you shouldn't lose too much work if you're using a cloud document. You can also save it as a local, which you'll need to manually save that. Hopefully you didn't lose too much, but I recommend cloud files. Ooh, buttons and balls. So XD is still inherently a 2D application. Technically, what I've shown you is more like 2.5D. It's not really 3D. We're changing it in 3D space, but you can see that it still has like no substance beyond the flat item it is, the flat layer. So you can't, there's ways to create some cubes, and basically, I don't know that I can do it that quickly, but what you would end up doing is building sides, and you could basically rotate things. So in this case, that's 90. You can see it basically disappears. But then if you position it, see, you can't even select it because it's so thin, it doesn't exist. But you could set all your rotations to various angles and then kind of create a cube. And in the same way we did the card flip for each angle, you can change those rotations. It would be a lot of work, but you could make a cube. Spheres, it would not be possible. What do you save files as? They're all XD files. So if I save this, and I will save it as a local document to share it with you all. So this is just going to save as an XD file. So you can see right here, it's just .xd.